Back to this once, 9 minutes after 2 o'clock, the Home Secretary, Priti Patel, has accused the Labour Party of defending murderers, rapists and drug dealers after opposition MPs demanded that the government cancel a deportation flight to Jamaica. Mr Jeremy Corbyn and John McDonald are among the 70 MPs who've signed a letter calling for the flight due to depart tomorrow to be delayed. 28 convicted criminals are scheduled to be returned to Jamaica. However, the Home Office is expecting legal challenges until the plane takes off, with Labour MPs criticising the government for failing to learn the lessons of the Windrush scandal. They are unashamedly collating that with this story. Bella Sankey is Director of Detention Action. Bella, afternoon to you. As you see it then, I mean, the Home Office tell us that all due processes have taken place. You don't just knock on somebody's door and stick them on a plane. What is the problem with this deportation?
Well, you've actually identified one just there. That's exactly what they're doing. They're knocking on the door and they're putting people on a plane, often without access to any legal advice, with very little warning. I've spent the week speaking to mothers and wives and to children who stand to lose a loved one on this flight and be permanently, forcibly separated from them. And I am hearing horror stories coming in today as well. Children bedwetting, children hitting their head against their bedroom wall, becoming reclusive, becoming anxious, serious mental and physical health deteriorations in children because they have not been afforded an opportunity to have their views heard in this process, and because access to justice is completely broken down in the system.
When you say children, children whose parents are going to be deported, or children who are going to...
Exactly. If, as you say, 28 people are going to be removed on this flight, our estimate is that maybe close to 100 children stand to lose a parent.
Right.
Everybody I've spoken to has at least one child. Some of them have 2, 3, 4. One man has 9 children.
Yes, I bet he does. You've got you've got kids who are going to be deprived of their sex offending father, or their murdering father, or their violent criminal father, or their drug dealing father.
No, if I may, no one is seeking to minimise the offences that.
But you're using the child example as your kind of opening reason as to why this is wrong, suggesting it's inhumane.
I think it's a really important reason, and I think it's important to reflect that everybody on this flight will have served their time in prison. So what deportation is essentially double punishment. Now, I'm not saying that deportation is never fair and proportionate. Of course, sometimes it absolutely will be, and it should be part of somebody's sentence. But the problem at the moment is the law is so blunt, and it doesn't have enough nuance in it. So, for example, one of the people that we've been working with was actually trafficked into drugs selling when he was a young boy. He's a victim of trafficking. He's been exploited, but he has a conviction as a result of that exploitation. He has a 2-year-old and a 3-year-old, and his partner is pregnant. Now, how can it be in the public interest for that man to be deported when he says that he never wanted to be involved in what he was involved in? He was exploited and he was damaged, but now he's completely rehabilitated. Surely,
how old is he now?
Now he's 23.
Okay, so it's a 23-year-old, and he was involved in drugs, did you say?
And he's been in the UK since he was a child, as is often the case. You know, I've had clients that arrived when they were 2, 3 years old. They don't know Jamaica. They don't stand a chance there. And that's all we're saying. There needs to be nuance. No one's trying to defend the criminality, but we're saying that we need to take a humane approach and really look at the facts and circumstances in each case, so that we don't ultimately do more harm to our society.
We're getting rid of. So you've got 23-year-old. Did you say he was a drug dealer?
Yeah, he was trafficked into selling drugs by counter-crimes operation.
So that was his defence in court, that he was trafficked. But
no, it wasn't his defence. It wasn't his defence, because often these kids who end up in this situation, they don't really know what's happened to them until they're much older. It's a really sensitive and it's a really delicate area, but it's not uncommon. On the last flight, that the government tried to do in February, they had 4 victims of trafficking on that flight. Those boys have now all been recognised by the government as victims of trafficking. But up until the 11th hour, they were the people sat on the flight that the government was telling us were all violent and dangerous criminals.
Well, yes, one of the people sat on that flight has just been charged with murder as well, who didn't take off on that flight. So I mean, there's many stories, of course, Bella, in all of this.
But there are many stories, and each case has to be looked at. But
indeed,
all we're saying is there needs to be more nuance.
But we've got a flight here where collectively people on it have served 294 years in jail. You don't get that for nicking a biro out of Smith's, do you?
Well,
these are serious criminals.
I think you make the point there. These are people that have already served a very long time in prison.
Yes,
and
I'm not
arguing that every single person shouldn't face deportation.
Okay.
But the problem with the system at the moment is there aren't safeguards.
But these aren't people that were born in this country, right? That's part of the Home Office's thinking. So they're not naturalised Brits in that respect. Those that have been trafficked, I mean, you talk about the trafficking aspect of this. I mean, if you've served time in jail, you're still a criminal, regardless of the background. You would have had to have done something that usurped your defence of being trafficked, something terrible, in order to go to jail.
Well, no, you could, there are miscarriages of justice, as everybody
So we happen
knows.
to have a plane load of people, all of whom are miscarriages of justice. We've also got rapists, we've got murderers.
You're totally mischaracterising me, aren't you? I've said every set of facts needs to be looked at, and I'm not saying that no one should ever be deported, but what I am saying is the system at the moment isn't working properly because the government is trying to deport people that have suffered exploitation. The government is also not taking properly into account the rights of children who stand to lose a parent. And you know, people just have to face up to the fact that the world is complex. That the world is a complex place, but what benefit does it do society deporting somebody who may have been here 20, 30 years, have committed an offence, served their time and be rehabilitated, if it's going to mean that their children grow up with all sorts of complex mental health problems? One of the kids who stands to lose a dad on this flight is currently in care. In fact, him and his sister are both in care. Dad's come out of prison and is trying to get him back after serving a relatively short sentence.
I mean, it sounds like a mess.
Social services have recommended that he goes back to dad, but the government's trying to deport dad, so those kids will spend their life in care. Like, that's not a fair outcome. All I'm saying is the situation is complex, and it doesn't work.
You've got people who've served 2 life sentences, 20 years each. I mean, you've got to commit some pretty serious offences, Bella, to get this. I mean, I understand mistakes can be made. And I'm not
saying for a moment that some people haven't committed serious offences. That's not my argument. If you listen to what I'm saying, and sometimes deportation will be right and it will be fair, but you need to have access to lawyers. You need to be able to investigate if somebody has an asylum claim. I've got clients that have been shot in Jamaica. I've got clients that have seen their siblings killed in Jamaica. I've got a client whose brother was killed in Jamaica earlier this year. You have to look into these things, because otherwise you're only going to repeat injustices and lead to more loss of life.
But I think the overarching reason behind this is that if foreign criminals commit terrible acts, they should be deported, and that most people would look at that, Bella, on the face of it and say that seems reasonable. Where was these caring dads who want their kids back when they were carrying out horrendous crimes? Where were they then?
It's interesting you say most people would agree with that. We've actually conducted some polling, polling on this issue.
I can't wait for this. What do the numbers say? 90% think it's terrible?
Back in June, a Commerce poll found that for people that have arrived in the UK as children, only 10% of the public thought that they should automatically be deported. In the overwhelming majority, 77%, said that those people should either only sometimes, rarely, or never be deported. And I think that shows that people do understand that if someone has arrived here in early childhood,
yes,
it's a more complex situation than just saying we're going to slam the door in your face.
But of course, it isn't. You know, it isn't a straightforward case that you will be deported after your sentence. Some prisoners will, some won't. I mean, Jamaica isn't even.
But what is the case is that the law at the moment says that the Home Office will automatically seek to deport you if you get a 12-month sentence, irrespective of when you were brought here. You could have been 2 years old. And another thing that I don't think people realise is you can be deported even if you were born in the UK. So I have a client at the moment who was born here. He's never been to the country that the Home Office is trying to deport him to, but he's not a citizen. There are all sorts of barriers that stop people getting citizenship. So often people's siblings will be citizens, but their parents didn't have enough money to get them citizenship papers. And that's why it's just so important to look at these cases properly.
But the best way around it, I mean, if you don't want to be deported and you want to remain in the UK, don't become a child rapist, a burglar, or a violent drug dealing criminal. That would be your answer, wouldn't it?
Well, as I've said,
all of those people would be sitting pretty in Acacia Avenue right now if they hadn't done that.
Sorry, I didn't catch that.
All of those people would be having ordinary lives in this country like the rest of us if they hadn't committed horrendous offences.
No, and as I say, no one is saying that any of those offences should be condoned. But we have a criminal justice system that is meant to deal with, punishment. And people serving their sentence, but also rehabilitation. We're a country that's long believed in second chances and rehabilitation. But no, as I say, no one's saying that this is black and white and that deportations can never take place. There are just too many problems in the system at the moment. And what happens when you have a charter flight and a mass deportation is the government becomes incentivized to get as many people on that flight as possible. And that's where we see the massive injustices. At the moment, I've got clients that don't have proper legal representation. They've never had legal advice. Surely at a bare minimum in the UK, the home of the rule of law, we should be allowing people the opportunity to make their case.
On that point, thank you, Bella Sankey. Always good to chew the fat on these things. She's the director of Detention Action. What did you make of that? There's 50 Jamaicans. Criminal records include 2 life sentences counted at 20 years each. A total of 294 years spent in jail. The Home Office said it intends to make deportation flights more regular as a means of sending a clear message regarding law and order. It's so far run more than 30 such enforced returns and deportation charter flights since April to countries including France, Nigeria, Spain. All enforced returns took place in 2019. Only 1% are Jamaican. You could add Poland on that as another on the list, in case people were just, for some curious reason, trying to make this Windrush correlation, which is misplaced and, well, it's just an inflammatory way to try and have a different kind of argument, right? That you wouldn't find Jamaica is anywhere at the top of the list in terms of those that have been deported in the last 12 months.